Well, welcome back to episode number 131, Adrian Bo Podcast, featuring Troy Malcolm. Bowie, we are back with another episode number 131, getting close to that 150 mark as we do the countdown to 150 episodes. And Adrian, today's episode is all about growth and change. Over the recent weeks, we've noticed in a lot of the metropolitan markets throughout Australia and abroad that there has been a slight shift in market expectations from buyers, from sellers, from auction results, from clearance rates, from days on market. All of the above, really, and it's a number of factors that have determined that. We're not going to go into all those factors today, but we're going to talk about where agents get stuck. And we know throughout all the training that we've done over the years that to grow, we actually need to evolve, we need to change. Adrian, first of all, welcome to the episode. Can't wait to get stuck into this topic. We have covered this off a number of times. So for those that are on and have heard us talk a little bit about this topic before, welcome back. Hopefully you've made a few adjustments and you've grown, but also for those that are hearing this for the first time, this is a blueprint for success to help make you go to the next level, especially in a shifting market. AB, why do people get stuck?
The Troy and Bo show. So why do people get stuck? Well, we always use an example of alliteration, which is the 4 S's, which you and I often talk about, Troy, which is it's usually the story they tell themselves. It's usually the state they're in or the energy, if you like, usually a lack of skills, or the fourth one is got to do with the strategy or a lack of strategy. So sometimes it can be all 4, Troy. Sometimes it's just one, but as a self-audit, whenever you're feeling stuck, either professionally, personally, or even spiritually, they're the 4 things we need to ask ourselves. You know, is it a story that I'm telling myself? Is it fiction or is it factual? You know, am I in the right state or do I have the right energy? Is my skill set there? Do I have the process? And then finally, you know, is the strategy in place? So it doesn't have to be too complicated, but it's certainly the first step to take that self-audit, Troy. And those 4 sort of global agenda items, if you like, are easy to double click on and take a deeper dive into, which we'll do.
Yeah, and I think, Adrian, if we start right up front with the story, I mean, the constant feedback that we get from agents that we're coaching that may feel a little bit stuck is, you know, I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm not experienced enough. It's my first year in real estate. I've been part of a team and now I'm by myself. I don't have the skill. I don't have the technology. I have the wrong CRM. I mean, these are all stories that we've heard over the years. How do you identify them, I guess, is my first question. And then what are the steps, Adrian, that you would take or recommendations if someone does feel that they've told themselves that story? How do you break that cycle? How do you break that repetition?
Well, firstly, ego needs to be removed. So I'm not suggesting everyone that tells themselves a story or feels stuck have an ego, but ego doesn't have to be a dirty word, Troy. Ego could be just reacting to something rather than responding. It could be the story is, you know, as you said, Troy, you know, too old, too young, I'm not good with social media, or, you know, I don't have the right CRM, or the brand isn't supporting me, all this sort of stuff. I mean, it's quite binary, as you and I know, Troy, in that you're either getting results or you've got excuses. There's no grey area when it comes down to that. And if you fall into the former category of getting results, then you don't need to change much. If anything, you just need to evolve and grow with your business. So I often see a lot of people, and so do you when we work together, Troy, people that are not growing with their business, meaning, you know, they started taking email inquiries on listed properties without an auto reply. That was fine when they had 3 listings. Then they get to 13 and then they're doing no auto reply. Then they go to not even calling email inquiries with phone numbers on it, and therefore allowing massive leakage in their business, because we know for a fact that anywhere between 1 to 3 out of every 10 email inquiries come through own a piece of real estate in our market. And we're certainly not going to identify that with an auto response, you know. So that's just one little example of many where people don't evolve with their business. So definitely need to identify that there could be a touch of ego involved. And if that's the case, leave it at the door when you walk into the office every single day. Secondly, you need a coach, quite frankly, to see what you can't see and hear what you can't hear, because very rarely does anyone identify being stuck on their own, Troy. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of great coaches out there. You know, you got Josh Vegan, Tom Panos, James Short, I hope I don't forget anyone, Claudio Encina, Carolyn Balderston, who have I forgotten? There's Sherry Storia.
Michael Sheargold.
Michael Sheargold. Yeah, so it doesn't really matter who your coach is. They're all outstanding. So the idea is, you know, it doesn't even need to be one of those people. It might just be your peer at the office. It might be a team member. It might be your spouse. It might be an accountability partner. But someone needs to listen to the story to basically challenge it and remind you that it's fiction, you know. And when someone does that, it's quite a penny dropping moment for a lot of people, because they've told themselves that story for so long that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, and I think the only caveat, Adrian, that we've always said is make sure that coach is coaching you and not simply being your cheerleader. Big difference. You need someone that's going to develop your skill, give you, I guess, the warmth that you need to keep you going and growing, but also give you the tough love as well, to make sure that you understand that there's a reason why they're a coach. There's a reason why they're there to help you. And the feedback they're providing, it's not just their ideas, it's the fact that they've seen a great cross-section of the real estate industry, and they want to provide you that feedback to help fast-track your success. Adrian, the second one that we talked a lot about, and they go very closely together. I've always said that the story and the state are so closely aligned. One equals the other in many cases, but the state that you're in, definitely the story you tell yourself, sometimes reflects the state. And so if you change the story that you've been telling yourself, a lot of the time the state is a byproduct of that. Adrian, what is the definition of the state that we talk about? And also, how can people understand that maybe they are in a bad state and they need to change that state? How do they do that? What are the things that they need to look at? And what are the identifiers that if they do find themselves or catch themselves in that state of mind, that they can quickly shift or do something to change that mindset?
Yeah, so the reason we call these global agenda items, because each of them have sub-agenda items. And if you had to create sub-agenda items for state, it would be mindset, energy, discipline. So let's say your story is that the market's come off. And let's say that puts you in a negative energy because you haven't conducted your morning ritual or your exercise. And the morning ritual doesn't have to be exercise, but it might be journaling, it might be walking, it might be reading, it might be praying. It doesn't really matter. But you haven't switched from sleep mode into business mode. And there needs to be a conduit to do that. And the only way to do that is through a morning ritual. So, you know, if you convince yourself the market's bad and then you don't conduct a morning ritual, then you go to your first appointment, and not only are you walking in with a negative mindset, no discipline and poor energy, whatever is going to come out of your mouth is unlikely to be a constructive or positive message, you know, to that client. So, you know, now there's some objective truths, which is, you know, is inflation an issue? Yes. Is COVID an issue? Yes. Is problems in the European, you know, between Russia and Ukraine an issue? Yes. I mean, but if it's not that, it'll be something else. And if it's not those things, it'll be something else. So really, you've got to choose what you subscribe to, and you've got to control the controllables. So I think when we talk about state, a lot of it's got to do with your physical state, your mental state, you know, your relationships with your spouse, relationships with your colleagues. So you're not going to be in a great state that every listing that comes up, you're arguing with one of your colleagues that you own that person because they're in your database, for example, right? That's just toxic, unproductive energy, because no one owns data at the end of the day. You might have sold them the property and spoke to them 20 times. It doesn't mean anything, right? So, you know, that's an example of poor state. And I suppose just looking at, you know, your mindset, energy, and your discipline process is important, Troy.
Yeah, and then Adrian, we move straight into strategy, and what we find is the biggest pitfall with agents is that they don't necessarily have a strategy that they follow. They may have a strategy written and it's tucked away in the top drawer and it's locked at each night, but they've actually got to implement that strategy and then follow the habits to get them in momentum. Adrian, why is a strategy so important? It should be pretty much read as a recipe card that you can repeat 120 times over. If the recipe was a successful sale at a property, you should be able to repeat that 120 times over every financial year, every calendar year to get the same result, which is a premium result. So Adrian, why is a strategy for agents always afterthought?
Well, if you go to JB Hi-Fi and buy a blender, it's got a user manual, okay? The human body is probably the most complicated combination of cells, both physical and spiritual and chemical, yet there is no user manual. So not only do you need a set of values, which is for yourself, so is health a priority, spirituality a priority, is relationships a priority, is financial, career, wealth creation a priority, yes or no? And therefore, every decision you make, you review your values. Secondly, do you have a business plan? Now, a business plan is not 20 pages, it's 6 points, which is how many sales do I want to do? What's my average commission? What's my average sale price? What's my team look like? And therefore, what's my gross commission income going to be? And out of that, what's my net commission income going to be, net GCI or net commission income, if you like, and what am I going to do with that at the end of the 12-month period? Am I going to go on a holiday? Am I going to buy an investment property, or am I going to send my parents overseas or my kids to a private school? That's basically a business plan. So the first step is creating a set of values for your personal existence. Secondly, creating a half a dozen point business plan, and then reviewing both every day, because you can have a user manual, but the reason you keep the user manual for the blender is sometimes you forget how to use it or something goes wrong, so you refer to it, right? And our definition or our translation piece of that, Troy, is that we get off track. As human beings and agents, we lose momentum, we get sick, we have financial issues, domestic issues, health issues, relationship issues, whatever it are. That's just 8 billion people in the world and they all have them. So at that point, we need to make sure that we review our values in our business plan to ensure that we stay off track less. That's all. You're going to get off track, accept that, budget for it, but you just want to get off track less. That's what it comes down to.
And then, Adrian, we finally move into where agents spend a lot of their time, or maybe not as much as they should, but it's about skills. And you and I are constantly surprised and a little bit taken back that the skill development and training of people within the industry doesn't take up high level priority. Even though we have this little device that's with us everywhere, we still miss those opportunities to really develop that skill, to be straightforward, practiced, rehearsed. So when you go and practice live, you're in a listing presentation, you can't get it wrong. I always liken this, Adrian, to my football career, and we used to spend so much time watching video, reviewing video, and then reviewing and previewing video of the next team we were going to play. And I'm always amazed that agents don't do that. They practice live on their clients, and it's a real big risk. And there's a lot of wastage in this. Adrian, what are some of the tips that you can offer around skills that you would encourage every one of our listeners, the Smart Brigade, to actually go out and practice and develop their skill?
Yeah, look, it's a great question, and it's an indefinite and perpetual process, isn't it, Troy? Like you and I are always at every single conference at ARIC every year, and everything that comes up, we're seat 1A. Yeah, constantly writing the most notes and comparing and sending them to each other digitally, and constantly breaking them down afterwards. Some might say that we may not need to do that, but you and I know that absolutely we do. We need to be relevant. We need to be evolving, and there's always something that we take away either from that conference or others. And we'll be there in a couple of months together, sitting together, taking a copious amount of notes, which can't wait to do. And so it's constant and perpetual. I think it's taken for granted a little bit, Troy. Like, when I first started in the industry, I had to drive to a place in North Sydney. I forgot what it was called, but it was sort of almost like a library where you'd have to fill in a form to order a cassette tape from the United States. And then it would, 7 weeks later, you'd get it, and it'd be Tom Hopkins or someone like that. And you'd have to, put it in your cassette and read it and everything. It was pretty crazy. So now I can literally press a button for zero cost. That used to cost like hundreds and if not thousands of dollars at the time, for nothing, and listen to an interview. You can invest a little bit more money and, have one of these coaches, or invest in one of my online products, or book a session with one of the outstanding coaches we talked about previously, or sometimes your own brand or office will provide coaching as well, which is great. So the problem is when those emails go out, and you and I know this a lot, Trevor, when those emails go out, a lot of people see it as a distraction rather than opportunity, So anything that comes into my inbox that's got anything to do with learning, development, coaching, training, I'm all over it, because it might just be one piece of gold nugget that I can share with a client, or with another agent, so whether it's a buyer, seller, or another coaching agent that I'm aware of. So I think you have to develop an insatiable appetite, number one. Number two, you have to realize that it's very accessible. And number three, we need to also accept that, ignorance is a choice at the moment, given this abundance of information, given we live in an age of information. And as you know, Troy, I believe that, same as the football analogy is an outstanding one. I'd hate to have you running at me actually on a football field. Geez, I was
a ducker and a weaver, Adrian. I was never one to take the first 3 tackles. It was always the tail end. I used to like catching the ball and putting it over the try line, to be honest.
Yeah, okay. I would hate to see you coming, mate. I'd run the other way. That's probably why I used to put it over the try line a lot.
Speed is my friend.
That's it. So yeah, I think skills also comes into ego as well, Troy. Like, if you think that you know it all, regardless if you've been in the industry for 1 year or 34 years like me, and 25 years like you, then that's a problem, because if you're not growing, you're dying. So that's probably the best way I can put it.
Well, there you go, listeners. Episode number 131, covering off all the tips and strategies to help you grow, get unstuck, and maybe give you a couple more insights into why it's important to have your story very clear, your state very clear, in a positive way. Have a strategy that you can follow and review, and also develop your skill. Adrian, for anyone that wants to get a little bit more info on any of your products and offerings, very easy. Just search Adrian Bo and on Google, and it'll come up with your academy. It'll come up with your coaching sessions. I've actually seen, Adrian, your content being released on Real Estate Business Online over the last couple of weeks has been very, very relevant in a changing market. So for everyone, if you haven't seen those articles, make sure you jump on and review. Adrian is one of the key contributors to that website and all other websites that are real estate focused. AB, until next week, that's it. Any final thoughts before we let our listeners get back to their day?
I just think anyone listening to this, Troy, is already adopting the 4 S's, if you want to call it that, just by taking that initial step, really. And that whether they're stuck or not, either way, they're part of, as you quite accurately pointed out, the Smart Brigade, who have chosen to learn and chosen to evolve rather than select ego. So that's fantastic for everyone listening. Please continue to invest in yourself. Warren Buffett is the most prolific investor in the world, and if you ask him, he'll tell you the best investment is in your education, not in a particular stock. So that is an incredible piece of insight from one of the best investors in the world, to develop yourself and invest in yourself. So yeah, if you're not doing that, then I think you're going to, definitely in this marketplace, in all marketplaces, but this marketplace in particular, that's going to be an issue.
Perfect. Well, Adrian, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be part of the Adrian Bo podcast featuring Troy Malcolm. Listeners, until next week, we're coming up to episode number 132, and we will see you all very soon.
Thanks, Troy. Thanks, listeners.